She had exactly $17 left. No job. No family. No place to go. That money was supposed to buy her dinner. Maybe even save her life. Instead, she gave every single dollar to a homeless man everyone else walked past. What she didn't know was that the man she thought was a beggar was actually a billionaire in disguise. And this one decision was about to change her life forever. Emma Carter was 26, jobless, exhausted, and quietly falling apart. 3 rejection emails sat unread on her phone. Her rent was overdue. Her stomach ached with hunger she had learned to ignore. That night, the city of New York felt colder than usual. Bright lights, busy streets, and people who never noticed the ones breaking silently beside them. As Emma walked past a subway entrance, she saw him. A homeless man. Dirty jacket, tired eyes, trembling hands. A cardboard sign that read, "Just hungry. God bless." She slowed down. Not because she had extra money. Not because she felt rich. But because she knew exactly what it felt like to have nothing left. Her fingers tightened around the last cash in her pocket. And in that moment, without knowing it, Emma Carter made a choice that would expose a secret worth billions. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 26 years old, and I live in New York City. I wish I could say I had it all figured out. That I had a job, a home, a future. But the truth? The truth is I have nothing. Not a single thing that feels safe or permanent. I wake up every morning to the same 4 walls of my tiny, run-down apartment, walls so thin I can hear every footstep of my neighbors and every argument on the street below. The ceiling leaks whenever it rains, and the landlord is so indifferent I sometimes wonder if he even knows I exist. My phone is full of rejection emails from jobs I applied to months ago. My bank account? Almost empty. I've become invisible. People pass me on the streets without even glancing. The world seems to have decided that someone like me is meant to stay unnoticed, forgotten, left behind. That evening, after another day of disappointment, I left my apartment with a heavy heart and an empty stomach. The winter wind in New York was cruel, cutting through my thin coat as if mocking me. My shoes had holes, my scarf barely kept my neck warm, and my hands shook from the cold and the fear of yet another empty day. I walked down the familiar streets of Midtown, past neon signs and crowded sidewalks, past people who looked like they were living lives I could never afford. They were laughing, carrying shopping bags, talking on expensive phones, wrapped in warmth and certainty. And I was nothing but a shadow of them, a girl with $17 in her pocket and a stomach that screamed for food. Then I saw him. A man. Sitting on the sidewalk in front of a subway entrance. His clothes were tattered, his hair messy, his face hidden behind days of dirt and exhaustion. He had a cardboard sign, scrawled in shaky handwriting. Just hungry. God bless. Most people hurried past him, avoiding eye contact. I knew why. He was one of those people society tells you to ignore. One of those people who make you uncomfortable, who remind you of your own vulnerabilities. But something made me stop. I felt a tug in my chest, an unexplainable pull. Maybe it was empathy. Maybe it was because I knew what it felt like to have nothing. Maybe it was because, in that moment, giving felt like the only thing that mattered. I reached into my coat pocket. My fingers brushed against the crumpled bills I had been saving for dinner, for subway rides, for something, anything that would keep me afloat for another day. It wasn't much, just $17. But it was everything I had. And yet, I gave it to him. I placed the bills into his rough, cold hands. His eyes met mine for the first time, and I froze. They were sharp, almost piercing, yet filled with something I couldn't name, something that felt like recognition, gratitude, maybe even sadness. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice deep, calm, and steady. I nodded, my throat tight. I expected him to look desperate, hungry, broken, but there was a dignity in him I didn't understand. Then he smiled. Not a wide, happy smile, but a small, almost imperceptible smile that made me feel uneasy. I turned to walk away, but something made me look back. That moment, that glance, I swear it felt like he knew more than I could imagine. More than anyone else could. I shrugged it off. I had no time for thoughts like that. I had to keep moving, had to survive. The streets were loud, the people oblivious, and I was alone with my decision. My last money, my small act of kindness, gone. And yet, my heart felt lighter. Little did I know, that single act, the only good choice I had made in weeks, was about to set off a chain of events I could never have imagined. The city that never sleeps. New York at night is magical and cruel all at once. The neon lights reflected off the wet streets, creating illusions of warmth and life. The smell of hot dogs, garbage, and exhaust mingled in the air. And yet, despite all the chaos, the city seemed alive in a way I wasn't. I walked past the corner store, past the bustling cafes, past couples holding hands. Every laugh, every smile, felt like a reminder that I didn't belong in this world. That I was a girl who had been knocked down too many times to get back up. As I turned the corner, I realized I had no destination. My feet moved on their own, carrying me through the streets I had walked 1,000 times, yet tonight, they seemed stranger, colder. And then it happened. He appeared again, in my path, as if the universe had decided our stories weren't done with each other. He was still on the sidewalk, still holding the cardboard sign. But this time, he looked at me differently. "Wait," he said, his voice calm but firm. I stopped, my heart hammering. You didn't have to give that," he said. I laughed bitterly. I didn't have much choice. It was all I had. He nodded, almost knowingly. "And that is exactly why you did it." I blinked. His words were strange, almost too deep, almost profound. "What do you mean?" I asked, a little irritated. "I was hungry. You were hungry. That's all there is to it." "No," he said. "It's never that simple. Some choices, they're bigger than us. And tonight, yours is bigger than you think." I frowned, unsure if he was mocking me or serious. But before I could respond, he was gone, slipping into the shadows of the street, leaving me alone with my racing heart and my empty pockets. Milky Way, a glimpse of something more. That night, I went home. I barely ate the cheap sandwich I bought with the last $3 I had left after the encounter. I thought about the man constantly. There was something different about him. Something I couldn't explain. Something that made me feel both small and important at the same time. I didn't know it yet, but he was watching me. And he wasn't just a homeless man. He was a billionaire who had lost faith in humanity. A man who disguised himself to find the truth about people's hearts. And I was about to prove something he hadn't seen in years, that even in despair, kindness still exists. And the world, cruel as it can be, had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, I woke up with the taste of cold metal in my mouth. My head was pounding, stomach still empty, and the tiny apartment I called home felt smaller than ever. The events of last night refused to leave my mind. That man, the homeless man I had given my last $17 to. I couldn't stop thinking about him. I shook it off. He's just a man in need. That's it. I tried to focus on survival, on the bills piling up, on finding a job that might never call me back. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't push him out of my thoughts. His eyes haunted me, the kind of eyes that made you feel like someone knew the deepest, most fragile parts of your soul. Glowing star, a strange encounter. I had no idea that the universe had already started spinning in my favor. That evening, after another exhausting day of walking endlessly through the city, I saw something strange near the subway station. Crowds had gathered, murmuring, phones out, flashing lights everywhere. People were whispering, pointing, taking videos. Curiosity piqued, I pushed through the crowd. And there he was, the same man I had helped the night before. Only now, he didn't look like a homeless man anymore. He was clean, sharp, polished, dressed in a tailored black coat, a subtle gold watch on his wrist glinting under the streetlights. The cardboard sign was gone. Gone was the exhaustion and despair. In its place stood a man radiating authority, confidence, and wealth. My jaw dropped. Could it really be him? The man I gave my last $17 to? The one everyone else ignored like he was nothing? He looked straight at me. And that small smile, the same smile from last night, appeared on his face. "You were the only one who helped me," he said quietly, his voice rich and calm. "Do you know how rare that is?" I shook my head, unable to find words. I needed to see if kindness still existed in the world, he continued. And tonight, you've proven it does. My heart was pounding. My mind was spinning. You're not homeless, are you? I whispered. He chuckled softly, almost sadly. No, Emma. Not anymore. I'm not just any man. I am, well, let's say I'm someone who's used to seeing the world from the top. And yet, I needed to understand the ground, the people who live and struggle below. And you're different. You cared when everyone else turned away. Gemstone the billionaire reveal. I froze. Wait, are you saying you're rich? He smiled again. More than you can imagine. Billionaire. But last night, I was testing humanity. Testing who gives without expecting anything in return. I blinked. My hand shook. My stomach dropped. Everything I thought I knew about life, about luck, about people, crumbled. You gave me everything you had, he said, voice calm but with an edge of admiration. And that kind of selflessness is priceless. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had given away everything I had, my last hope, my last money, to a man who didn't need it. And now he was smiling at me like I had done something extraordinary. I couldn't speak. Words failed me. You don't understand, I finally whispered. I had nothing. That money it was all I had for food for the week. I was starving. And yet, he said softly, you gave. That's the kind of courage that changes destinies, Emma. Yours and mine. Milky Way life-changing offer. He stepped closer, his presence commanding yet gentle. I want to help you, he said simply. Not because I need to repay you, but because I believe you deserve a chance to live a life without this constant struggle. I laughed nervously, incredulous. You mean money? He shook his head. I mean more than that. I want to give you opportunity, education, security, freedom from worry, and yes, the means to live a life you never imagined. My mind raced. I was speechless, confused, terrified. Why me? I asked. My voice trembled. There are millions of people. Why pick me? Because you're honest. You're kind. You're one of the rare ones left who gives without expectation. That matters more than wealth. That matters more than bloodline or status. And the world will notice you soon enough if you let me help. Cityscape Emma's first taste of change. Over the next few weeks, everything shifted. I moved into a small but beautiful apartment, fully furnished, overlooking the city I had always walked through but never lived in. The man, whose name was Alexander Blackwood, introduced me to people, gave me mentors, and provided guidance I had never dreamed of receiving. Jobs I once dreamed of were now offered to me not because of luck, but because he vouched for me, showing me the power of connections built on trust and integrity. Even with all this, I never forgot that night. The night I had nothing, yet gave everything. The night that proved that, even when life is cruel, kindness has power. Broken heart the emotional twist. But life wasn't just magic and sudden wealth. There were complications. Not everyone trusted me. Not everyone believed in my sudden rise. Friends from my past looked at me differently, and some relationships I cherished faded. I realized that sometimes, when life gives you everything you thought you wanted, it also tests you in ways you could never predict. Alexander watched me through it all. Always silent, always observing. But he never judged. He never pressured. He simply let me grow, let me face the world, and let me understand that sometimes the greatest treasures in life are people who believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. One night, as I walked back to my apartment after a meeting, Alexander stopped me in the street. I have something to show you, he said, holding a small envelope. Inside was a document. My name on it. Property, investments, accounts, all transferred into my name. I had inherited part of his fortune, not as charity, but as recognition of the courage and kindness I had shown. I couldn't breathe. Tears streamed down my face. This can't be real, I whispered. He smiled. It's real. But remember, Emma, it's not just about money. It's about who you are. And now, the world will see you for who you truly are. But are you ready for it? I didn't know. I wasn't sure. But deep down, I felt a fire ignite inside me. A fire I hadn't felt in years. The fire of hope, courage, and destiny. And at that moment, I knew my life would never be the same again. I never imagined my life would change this fast. Just weeks ago, I was walking the streets of New York with nothing but $17 in my pocket and a pounding heart filled with hunger and fear. Now, I was standing in a world I had only seen through glass windows, high above in offices and penthouses, surrounded by people whose lives seemed effortless and untouchable. Alexander had opened doors I never even knew existed, and yet, despite everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that the world outside was waiting to test me. The first time he handed me the documents transferring a portion of his fortune into my name, I laughed in disbelief. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. It felt unreal. Alexander watched me carefully, his calm, piercing gaze reminding me that he had been observing more than just my generosity. He had been observing my character, my resilience, my courage. "You've done more than anyone could expect," he said softly. "And now, it's time the world sees who you really are." The weight of his words sank in slowly. This wasn't about charity. It was about recognition. It was about proving that, even when life seems cruel, kindness and integrity can carve a new path. The next morning, Alexander suggested we visit a public event. He said it was time for me to be introduced to influential people, investors, business leaders, philanthropists. He didn't want me to feel overwhelmed. He wanted me to understand that the world could be kind, but only if I stood strong, only if I trusted my instincts. I dressed carefully, wearing something modest but elegant, a black dress that made me feel invisible and powerful at the same time. My heart raced as we stepped into the massive conference hall, its lights dazzling, the crowd buzzing with energy. People murmured as I walked in, whispering questions I couldn't hear. Alexander kept his hand lightly on my shoulder, grounding me. Then he spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to introduce someone extraordinary. Someone who has reminded me and all of us that compassion is priceless." All eyes turned to me. My stomach twisted, my mouth dry. I swallowed hard. I had never been the center of attention before, never like this. Alexander continued, "Her name is Emma Carter. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know the test. She only knew kindness. And because of her courage, she has earned not just my respect, but the chance to change her life forever." The crowd erupted in murmurs and whispers. Some clapped politely, unsure of what to make of this sudden reveal. Others stared at me like I had fallen from the sky into their meticulously ordered world. I looked at Alexander, my eyes brimming with tears. His expression was calm but proud. After the event, we stepped outside. The city lights sparkled around us, but the noise of the crowd still echoed in my mind. I felt like a ghost passing through a world that was too bright, too loud, and too fast. And yet, I felt alive in a way I had never felt before. Over the next few days, Alexander taught me how to manage what I had been given. He introduced me to financial advisors, lawyers, and mentors. I learned quickly that money was not just paper, it was power, responsibility, and influence. But he also reminded me that it wasn't about wealth, it was about using what I had been given to live authentically, to stay true to the girl who had nothing but gave everything. One evening, as we walked along the rooftop terrace of his private penthouse, overlooking the city, I asked him the question that had been burning in my mind. "Why me, Alexander? Why did you choose me out of all the people in this city?" He paused, looking at the skyline. "Because you didn't see me as a billionaire. You saw me as a man in need. And that kind of vision, that kind of heart, is rare. It's the only thing that truly matters in this world. The rest is just noise." I felt tears slip down my cheeks. It was humbling and overwhelming all at once. Had survived, not because of luck, not because of talent, but because of a moment of pure, selfless courage. And now the universe, or Alexander, was rewarding me in a way I had never dared dream. But life, as I soon learned, had more tests in store. As my presence in high society grew, whispers followed. Some people doubted my intentions. Some assumed I had manipulated Alexander or that I was simply lucky. Old friends I had trusted began acting distant, jealous. I realized that wealth and opportunity came with scrutiny and judgment, and the streets that had once been my home now felt both distant and comforting in their honesty. One night, Alexander called me to his office. "Emma, you're about to meet someone very important," he said, handing me a sealed envelope. Inside was an invitation to a gala unlike any other, a private gathering of some of the most powerful people in America. The twist? I was not just a guest. I was being publicly recognized as a philanthropist, someone who had made a tangible impact on the world already, all because of one act of kindness. The night of the gala, I walked in wearing a flowing emerald dress, my hair carefully done, my hands trembling slightly. Cameras flashed, and whispers filled the room as I was introduced as Emma Carter, the woman whose selflessness had changed a billionaire's perspective and now the lives of countless others through his foundation. I couldn't believe it. Just months ago, I had been standing on the cold streets, hungry and ignored. Now, the same city that had overlooked me was celebrating me. During the gala, Alexander leaned close. "This is your moment. Own it." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I smiled at the crowd, waved politely, and felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't invisible anymore. That my choices, my heart, my courage, had the power to shape destiny. Weeks passed. I invested in causes I cared about: homeless shelters, educational programs, food banks. I became a voice for those who had none, never forgetting the moment that had changed everything. Alexander stayed by my side, a quiet guide and mentor, but never interfering. He let me grow, let me shine, let me make mistakes, and most importantly, let me be me. Then came the day that truly solidified the story of my transformation. Alexander called me to a private dinner at his estate. The snow was falling gently outside, covering the city in a silent blanket of white. The warmth of the mansion contrasted sharply with the cold I had endured just months ago. He handed me a small, ornate box. "Open it," he said, his voice calm but full of weight. Inside was a key, an actual key, and a note to your first home. The place you will always have, no matter where life takes you. Consider it a symbol of what you earned, not through luck, but through courage. I stared at him, tears streaming freely. I don't even know what to say," I whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just remember, Emma, that life rewards the heart, not just the mind or skill. You gave when you had nothing. That is what changed everything." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight and meaning of his words. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. Safe. Seen. Appreciated, not for my talent, not for my looks, not for what I could offer, but for the person I was. And in that moment, I understood that life is a series of choices, some small, some enormous. But every choice matters. Every act of kindness, every sacrifice, every moment of courage, it all adds up, and sometimes the universe, or someone like Alexander, will notice. The streets I had once walked alone were still there, but I no longer feared them. The city that had once ignored me was now a place of opportunity, challenge, and hope. And the girl who had nothing, who had given everything, was no longer invisible. She was Emma Carter, and the world would never forget her story. For the first time in years, I smiled freely. Not the kind of smile that hides pain or fear, but the kind that radiates peace, resilience, and the knowledge that sometimes, when you give everything, life will give back in ways you could never imagine. And in the quiet moments, when I stood by the window of my new home overlooking the city, I whispered a simple thanks to the universe and to the man who showed me that even a single act of kindness could change destiny forever. Because life had given me a second chance, a new beginning, and a story worth telling. And I knew, without a doubt, that nothing would ever be the same again. I thought the hardest part of my life was surviving with nothing. I was wrong. The hardest part was learning how to live after everything changed. People think money fixes everything. That once your bank account fills up, your heart does too. But wealth doesn't erase memories. It doesn't silence the nights when you remember who you were before the miracle happened. Some nights, I still wake up expecting to hear the sound of my old radiator rattling in that tiny apartment. I still instinctively count my money before sleeping, even though I no longer have to. Trauma doesn't disappear just because your circumstances do. Alexander noticed before I ever said a word. You still carry the streets inside you, he said one evening as we stood by the window, watching the city breathe below us. I don't know how to let them go, I admitted. He nodded. Don't. They're part of what makes you real. That was the first time I understood something important. I wasn't meant to forget where I came from. I was meant to build from it. As my story spread, invitations poured in. Interviews, panels, charity events. People wanted to hear the fairy tale, the homeless test, the hidden billionaire, the girl who gave her last money and became everything overnight. But I refused to let my life become entertainment. I agreed to speak publicly only once. Standing on that stage, under bright lights, I felt smaller than I ever had on the streets. Because this time, I wasn't invisible. This time, every eye was on me. My name is Emma Carter, I said into the microphone, my voice steady despite my racing heart. And I didn't help a homeless man because I believed something magical would happen. I helped him because I knew what it felt like to be hungry, cold, and unseen. The room went silent. Kindness isn't an investment strategy, I continued. It's a choice. And sometimes the world notices. Sometimes it doesn't. But that doesn't make the choice any less important. I walked off that stage knowing I had said everything that mattered. After that night, something shifted. I stopped being the girl who got lucky and started becoming the woman who builds. I created programs that didn't just hand out money but restored dignity. Job training, mental health support, transitional housing. I insisted on meeting people face to face, looking them in the eyes, listening to their stories. Every person reminded me of myself. Alexander watched quietly, always a step behind, never controlling, never claiming credit. One evening, as we sat in his library surrounded by books I was still learning to pronounce, I asked him something I had been afraid to ask for a long time. Why did you disappear that night? I asked softly. After I gave you the money. You didn't stay. You didn't explain. He leaned back, thoughtful. Because if I had stayed, your kindness would have turned into expectation. I needed it to be pure. That answer stayed with me. Weeks passed. Months. My life filled with purpose, but also with questions I couldn't ignore anymore. Alexander wasn't just my benefactor. He wasn't just my mentor. There was a silence between us that said more than words ever could. One night, after a long day visiting shelters, we walked the same street where everything had begun. The same subway entrance. The same cracked sidewalk. I stopped. This is where I met you, I whispered. Yes, he said. This is where I remembered who I was. I turned to him. You could have helped thousands without pretending to be homeless. Why did you need to test people like that? He looked at the ground for a long moment. Because I lost my son, he said quietly. My heart dropped. He died believing the world was cruel. He thought people only cared when they wanted something in return. After he passed, I couldn't live with the idea that he might have been right. Tears burned my eyes. So you went looking for proof, I said. Yes, he replied. And I found you. That was the moment I truly understood the weight of what had happened. This wasn't just my redemption story. It was his too. As my foundation grew, so did resistance. Critics questioned my credibility. Online voices accused me of manipulation, of being a plant, of being a lie. For the first time since my transformation, fear returned. What if they're right? I asked Alexander one night. What if the world turns on me? He looked at me calmly. Then you'll survive it. You already survived worse. And he was right. When an investigative journalist published a piece trying to tear my story apart, something unexpected happened. People defended me. Former homeless men and women I had helped spoke up. Social workers shared receipts. Volunteers shared stories. Strangers shared moments of kindness inspired by my story. The noise turned into silence. Truth has a way of standing on its own. On the anniversary of the night, I gave away my last $17. I returned to the streets alone. No cameras. No security. Just me. I sat down at the same spot and placed a small envelope on the ground. Inside was $17. Not because I needed to give it away, but because I needed to remember. As I stood to leave, a young girl approached me. Thin jacket. Nervous eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked. I smiled. "I am," I said. "And you will be too." When I walked away, I realized something profound. I was no longer chasing survival. I was living with purpose. That night, Alexander joined me on the rooftop again. "You don't need me anymore," he said gently. I looked at him, startled. "That's not true." He smiled. "It is. And that's how I know I did the right thing." I reached for his hand, holding it firmly. "You didn't save me," I said. "You just reminded me who I already was." The city stretched endlessly below us, loud, beautiful, cruel, hopeful. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of it. Because I knew something the girl I used to be didn't. Even when you have nothing, your heart can still change everything. And sometimes, I used to believe that life only changed once. That there was a single moment where everything broke, and a single miracle that fixed it. But I learned something far more powerful. Life changes again, when you finally understand why it changed the first time. The city still looked the same from my window. Same lights. Same noise. Same restless movement. But I wasn't the same girl watching it anymore. I wasn't the girl counting coins, praying tomorrow would be kinder. I wasn't the girl afraid of being seen or heard. I had become someone who could stand still in the chaos and not feel lost. The foundation was thriving now. Not because of money, but because of people. People who showed up every morning believing they mattered. People who smiled differently once they were treated with dignity instead of pity. One afternoon, a man approached me at the shelter. He looked familiar. Older. Tired. "You don't remember me," he said gently. I studied his face, then my breath caught. "You were there," I whispered. "That night? At the subway." He nodded. "I was sitting 2 people away from Alexander. I watched you give him your last money." Tears filled my eyes. "I didn't help him because I thought anyone was watching," I said. "That's why it mattered," the man replied. That moment saved more than one life. When he walked away, I stood there shaking. Because I finally understood the ripple effect of one small, quiet choice. That night, Alexander invited me to dinner. Not a formal dinner. No staff. No ceremony. Just us. "You look peaceful," he said. "I am," I replied. "For the first time, I don't feel like I'm running anymore." He smiled. "Then you're ready." "Ready for what?" He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents. His foundation. His assets. His long-term plans. "I'm stepping back," he said. "I want you to take the lead." My heart stopped. "I can't replace you," I said quickly. "You're not meant to," he replied. "You're meant to be better. Different. Human." I stared at the papers. Fear crept in. Responsibility. "Wait. What if I fail?" I asked. Alexander leaned forward. "Then you'll fail honestly. And that is still success." Silence filled the room. Finally, I nodded. "I'll do it," I said. "But not alone." He smiled. "That's the right answer." The transition was not easy. Leadership never is. I made mistakes. I doubted myself. There were nights I cried quietly, wondering if the girl from the streets was pretending to be someone she wasn't. But then I would remember the cold pavement, the hunger, the $17, and I would stand back up. Months later, on a quiet winter evening, Alexander asked me to walk with him. We went back to the same street, same subway entrance, same place where everything began. "I come here when I need to remember," he said. "So do I replied. He reached into his pocket and handed me a folded piece of cardboard. It was old, worn. On it were the words, "Just hungry. God bless." I kept it, he said, not as a reminder of poverty, but as a reminder of truth. I couldn't speak. "I don't have much time left," he continued softly. "Not illness. Just age. And peace. I wanted to know before I go that what I started will live beyond me." I took his hand. "It will," I promised. "I won't let it become cold or distant. I'll keep it human." That night, when I returned home, I opened the small box I had kept hidden in my drawer. Inside was $17. I had never touched it. Not because I needed it, but because it reminded me who I was when I had nothing but my heart. The next morning, I donated it anonymously at the shelter. No cameras. No recognition. Just gratitude. Years passed. The world moved on to new stories. New scandals. New miracles. But quietly, something remained. A foundation that treated people with dignity. A city that whispered kindness instead of cruelty. Lives that changed not because someone was rich, but because someone cared. On the anniversary of that night, I stood on a stage again. Not as a miracle story. Not as a headline. Just as Emma Carter. My story isn't about a billionaire, I said into the microphone. It's about a choice. A choice anyone can make. Even when you're tired. Even when you're scared. Even when you have nothing. The room was silent. Because the truth is, I continued, you never know who you're helping. And sometimes, you're not changing someone else's life. You're changing your own. When I walked off the stage, I felt light. Whole. At peace. That night, standing by my window, watching New York breathe below me, I smiled. Not because I was rich. Not because I was successful. But because I had learned the most important lesson of all. Even when the world gives you nothing, you can still give it everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world gives back.